We start with politics in Zambia. It's become quite messy and personal in the build-up to the coming presidential elections on the 20th of January there. One of the presidential candidates has challenged the other to subject himself to a medical test to prove his fitness for office. Now, Zambia has recently lost two sitting presidents, Levi Mwanasa in August 2008 and Michael Sata in October last year. Now, the two candidates are not leaving health to chance, they say. The debate has also sucked political parties into the question of whether presidential candidates should undergo medical tests. Now, for the latest on the Zambian presidential elections, we have political analyst and researcher from Good Governance Africa, Kate Stegeman. Good morning, Kate. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, can we start by sort of just setting the political scene within Zambia at the moment on the back of, well, these kinds of discussions that's going on in the media there?
Well, elections are coming up on the 20th of January, so things are obviously hotting up like they would in sort of any pre-election period. But what makes things a little different this year is exactly what you've pointed out, Eben, that there's this issue of the president's health. So as we've seen in the last 7 years, two sitting heads of state in Zambia have passed away. And now there's been a contentious issue about whether or not the main opposition candidate basically has called for the government candidate, Lungu, to have a fit bill of health. And in the beginning, he sort of said, oh, come on, this is electioneering and this is vicious and etc. And then sort of more recently, he seems to have said, okay, fine, if you want to check me, that's okay. And there have been rumors in the Zambian tabloids that he might have a kidney issue. Whether or not that is the case will be seen if he's willing to be transparent.
That's the big issue, really. They were talking about a kidney transplant that he needed, and on the back of this is where this has been turned into a sort of political football a little bit.
Absolutely. And at the same time, as well as whether or not he needs the transplant, there are two sort of other issues there. First of all, there's the issue that Zambia does not have a good system of health. And if he were to undergo some sort of a transplant, then what's going to happen? Is he going to be pushed to the front of the list? Will he go elsewhere like Sata went, the previous president? And then the second issue is also maybe does he have a right to privacy? I mean, it's difficult. These things are complicated. So we sort of need to weigh up these issues about his rights to health versus his rights to privacy. But obviously the Zambian electorate are the most important thing here. Yeah. And I can imagine that they would want to know if that is the case with candidate Lunga from the Patriotic Front.
How is this debate playing out in the Zambian media and then in the Zambian public? What are they saying? Is it that presidential candidates should in future in that country take medical tests in order to prove their health? They have lost quite a few the last 6 or 7 years.
It seems to be that is where things are moving. And I don't think Lunga, it would be in his interest to deny that. So I have a feeling that he will be open to having tested. But then again, he's a politician. Who knows? You know, a kidney transplant is a big deal. Yeah. I mean, that's not just, you know, you have a heart condition, you know, something that is easier to treat. You know, have an issue that needs medication. That is a big issue, and that would take him out of power. So if that is the case, we need to know about that. But I think the bigger issue here, and why it's interesting for us from a governance point of view, is that, as you've mentioned, political football. This call actually came from his own party originally. So there was a succession battle after Sata died within the Patriotic Front. There was a succession battle about whether or not Lunga would be the right candidate, and they had to go to court. Then in the opposition party as well, there was also a succession battle about who would be the correct candidate. And in the end, Mumba won against Banda, and he is now standing in that race. But we also have a third big player, which a lot of people are touting are going to take some power away from the Patriotic Front, and that's Hichilema from the United Party for National Development. And he seems to be incredibly popular with people. His party was the third biggest party in the last elections, but he really seems to have whipped up things not just around the incumbents' health, but also about the fact that they have huge problems with poverty, inequality, and ailing health system. And he seems to be getting really popular and growing.
And that's one of the reasons why this health question is so massive in the country. I think you've got infant mortality rates of something like 70 out of every 1,000 births, which is amongst the highest in the world, one would think. That's why this discussion is so pertinent there.
Absolutely. And Hichilema has been incredibly smart and incredibly strategic to not necessarily just focus on Lungu and to make it a broader issue about the state of health in Zambia. And that is obviously going to be an electoral issue, and that's what they're campaigning on. There are also other issues about the economy and all those sorts of things, and mining licenses and a whole lot of arguments I'm not sure we have time for now. But in terms of social indicators in Zambia, it will be interesting to see what happens with these three main candidates. And yeah, we're looking forward to seeing how things go when they go to polls.
You know, in Africa, we always have issues around the run-up to elections, whether elections are free and fair, what kind of issues. Tell us about the issues that we've seen in the run-up to these elections next week in Zambia.
Well, I think the first issue, as I touched on, was the succession battles, and that wasn't solved within the two parties, both the Patriotic Front and the MMD. They had to go to court to decide the candidate, so that's the one issue. Democracy doesn't really seem to have worked there, but they followed the institutions and the process, and they were allowed to do that, and that's fine. I would say the second issue then is that while there hasn't been electoral violence per se, it hasn't been ugly, there have been some incidents of the Patriotic Front in particular, so that's Sata's party and the incoming Lunga candidate, rallying a little bit of nonsense around some of the opposition parties. They've used an act from sort of colonial era times where they've basically arrested some candidates, some rallies have been interfered with. So while things haven't been ugly, there definitely hasn't been a sense that government is really letting opposition campaign in a free and fair manner. So we need to keep a very, very close eye on that coming up to the elections.
In conclusion, I just want to wrap up the sort of power struggles within the ruling party. The acting president was asked to resign, and there was a race scenario that played out. How are they looking going into this election?
Not good. I mean, of course, as Good Governance Africa, you know, we don't want to take a stand. We want all, you know, candidates to have a free shot. But the Patriotic Front, I mean, the complication is as well is that there were factions within the Patriotic Front. That's why we saw two candidates. And when Sata died, he was kind of the unifying factor. And what happened was that Guy Scott, who was the vice president, who cannot run as a candidate because he's not of Zambian descent, then, you know, he was obviously just acting president, but he basically did not endorse Lunga. He endorsed another candidate. So there's succession battles and lots of things going on in Zambia, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be in the Patriotic Front's favor, and it seems that there is a chance they might lose some power. That said, we have had other opposition leaders from the MMD party basically endorse Lunga from the Patriotic Front, and that's crazy. So Bando, who is an MMD man, has now said, actually, you know what, I don't support my own candidate. He beat me in court. I'm going to support the PF government candidate. So it really is exactly like you said, political football to the nth degree.
And the expectation of the election itself is that of being peaceful and free and fair next week?
We hope so. I mean, you know, Zambia generally is quite a stable country, and obviously there'll be observers there, SADC, etc. And we're hoping that this act that they've been using with a little bit of intimidation, now that the spotlight is on government in particular, that won't be happening. But time will tell, and obviously if it does happen, we hope that you'll be covering it and kicking up a fuss like the rest of the media.
As we always do here at SABC News. Thank you, Kate Stegeman, who's a political analyst and researcher from Good Governance Africa, giving us the detail ahead of the election in Zambia on the 20th of February. That's next week, Tuesday it is. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.